Welcome. Thank you for tuning in. Let's begin. The story of Apple is more than a corporate history. It is a modern epic, a narrative woven from the complementary and conflicting passions of its founders. It is a story of rebellion, of artistry, of unimaginable technical genius, and of devastating personal betrayals. It is the story of how a digital blue box, built by two mischievous hobbyists, one, a show-off computer designed for a hobbyist club, two, and an obsession with pirate flags, three, fundamentally altered the course of human interaction. To understand Apple, one must look past the sealed white boxes and into the garages, the boardrooms, and the top-secret labs where these futures were fiercely debated and forged. This is a journey through the secrets, the anecdotes, and the pivotal, often overlooked moments that transformed a garage startup into the most valuable and influential empire on Earth. This report chronicles 149 of these secrets, tracing the company's DNA from its prehistory as a phone freak prank to its modern incarnation as a global services empire. Part 1. The Freak Origins and the First Partnership, 1971 to 1976. Before they were computer builders, they were phone freaks, a counterculture cadre of hobbyists who explored the vast, hidden infrastructure of the global telephone network. This early adventure was not merely a prelude to Apple. It was the complete template for their partnership. Secret 1. The Secrets of the Little Blue Box. The story begins not with a computer, but with a magazine article. A young, brilliant engineer named Steve Wozniak became captivated by an Esquire magazine piece titled Secrets of the Little Blue Box. 4. The article detailed the underground world of phone freaks, hackers who had discovered ways to hijack the analog phone system. 6. Secret 2. Captain Crunch and the 2600 Hz tone. Secret. The most famous freak was John Draper, known by his handle, Captain Crunch. 4. He earned this name by discovering that a specific plastic toy whistle, given away as a prize in boxes of Captain Crunch cereal, could perfectly replicate the 2600 Hz tone that AT&T used as a supervisor signal, allowing a freak to trick the system into routing free long-distance calls. 6. Secret 3. Wozniak's unequaled digital marvel. Inspired, Wozniak decided to build his own blue box, but his version was different. While other freaks used electronics analog models, Wozniak's design was entirely digital. It was smaller, more accurate, and more advanced than anything else in the freaking scene. Steve Jobs later boasted it was the first digital blue box in the world. Wozniak himself, with characteristic pride in his engineering, said, "I had tricks in there that I never even equaled in my Apple designs." Believe it or not. 1. Abraire, Secret 4. The prank call to the Vatican. As you start, the two Steves, Wozniak and Jobs, sought out the legendary Captain Crunch himself to test their new digital box. 8. Wozniak had a specific goal. He wanted Draper to show him how to call the Pope. 8. Secret 5. This is Henry Kissinger. After many failed attempts, they successfully navigated the global telephone network and reached the Vatican. It was 4:30 a.m. in Rome. Wozniak, the practiced prankster, got on the line and began speaking in a gruff voice, impersonating U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger. He declared that he wanted to confess. 8. The Vatican staff began scrambling to wake the Pope before a bishop got on the line, realized it was a prank, and hung up. BBB. Secret 6 for Apple 8. For Wozniak, the pure engineer, the goal was simple exploration. He later said, "I called only to explore the phone company as a system. I was so pure." 9. But for Steve Jobs, it was an epiphany. He saw a product. BBB. Secret 7. The first business. This became their first ever commercial venture. They sold the boxes to fellow students and insiders, eventually expanding to the Los Angeles area. Secret 8. The $40 box and the $150 price. Their business model was simple. The parts for each digital blue box cost about $40 to produce. Jobs set the sale price at $150. Secret 9. The first 40 sales. Jobs would later claim they made over 100 units, but Wozniak, who was hand-assembling them, put the real number between 30 and 40. Secret 10. There wouldn't have been an Apple. This crazy illegal venture was the moment the two Steves learned to work together. It provided the initial capital and, more importantly, the confidence. Jobs stated it plainly to his biographer. If it had not been for Wozniak's blue boxes, there wouldn't have been an Apple. It was, as Jobs called it, the foundation event. This early venture established the dynamic that would define Apple for 40 years. Wozniak's pure, elegant engineering and Jobs' relentless drive to package and monetize that genius into a commercial product. Part 2. The Homebrew, the Founding, and the Forgotten Founder, 1975-1976. Apple was born from a unique, almost utopian, hobbyist culture. Its founding, however, was a commercial act that immediately tested those ideals, resulting in the exclusion of the one man who feared to take the risk. Secret 11. The Crucible in the Garage. The Homebrew Computer Club was an informal group of electronic enthusiasts who met in Menlo Park, California, beginning in March 1975. Described as the crucible for an entire industry, the first meeting was held in the garage of a man named Gordon French. Secret 12. The Dragged-Along Genius. A shy 24-year-old Steve Wozniak, then an engineer at HP, was dragged along to that very first meeting by his friend and fellow HP engineer, Alan Baum. Secret 13. The Shy Engineer Who Never Spoke. Wozniak, later reflecting on his shy 20-something self, recalled that he never once raised my hand to speak during the club meetings. But he was totally inspired, listening to speakers talk about how computers for everyone would change life totally. Secret 14. The club that does not exist. The club's culture was defined by its anti-establishment, informal nature. Its leader, Lee Felsenstein, would famously begin every meeting by announcing the convening of the Homebrew Computer Club, which does not exist, which was always met with happy applause. Secret 15. The Show-Off Computer. P. Wozniak began designing his own computer, the Apple I, but it was not designed to be a commercial product. Wozniak stated that the Apple I and II were designed strictly on a hobby for fun basis. Secret 16. The very few chips brag. The Apple I was meant to bring down to the club and put on the table during the random access period. 12. The goal was simply to show off to the other hobbyists. The primary brag was its elegant design, which used very few chips compared to other hobbyist machines. Secret 17. The give to help others ethos. This hobbyist origin was rooted in the club's official theme, give to help others. Wozniak fully embraced this philosophy, which would later be called open source. Secret 18. Wozniak's free schematics. In line with the ethos, Wozniak did not guard his design. He passed around the schematics for the Apple I for free at the club meetings, and even visited people's homes to help them build their own copies. This open, collaborative spirit was in direct conflict with Steve Jobs' vision of a closed commercial company. Secret 19. The forgotten founder, Ronald Wayne. On April 1st, 1976, the Apple Computer Company was officially formed. 1-4. Jobs and Wozniak were the primary partners, but there was a third founder, Ronald Wayne. 1-5. Secret 20. The adult supervision from Atari. Wayne, whom Jobs and Wozniak knew from their time at Atari, 1-4, was brought in as adult supervision. 1-7. He was seen as a balance to the visionary but volatile fervor of the two Steves. 1-7. Secret 21. The 10% tiebreaker stake. The partnership agreement, which Wayne himself drafted. 15, gave Jobs and Wozniak 45% of the company each. Wayne received the remaining 10%. PPP, circle, separated bracket. Wayne's 10% stake wasn't just for his contributions. Its primary documented purpose was to allow him to serve as a tiebreaker in disputes between Jobs and Wozniak. 15. From day one, the two Steves knew their partnership was combustible and required a mediator. Secret 23. The Newton Crest logo. PPP. Wayne, an artist and draftsman, also designed Apple's first logo. 15. It was a complex, intellectual, pen and ink drawing, sometimes called the Newton Crest. 18. Secret 24. A mind forever voyaging. A P in a P. The logo depicted Isaac Newton sitting under an apple tree, moments before the apple fell. It was framed by a ribbon banner that included a quote from the poet Wordsworth. Newton, a mind forever voyaging through strange seas of thought. 18. P. Secret 25. The first Steve Jobs design decision. Jobs, the brand builder, almost immediately rejected Wayne's logo. He felt it was too old-fashioned, 20, and critically was too detailed to be reproduced clearly at small sizes. 20. This was the first clash between a hobbyist, Wayne, and product mentality. Secret 26. The $800 decision. Just 12 days after the company was formed, Ronald Wayne left. 14. He sold his 10% stake, the tiebreaker share, back to Jobs and Wozniak for a one-time payment of $800. Secret 27. The $500 final waiver. A short time later, Wayne accepted another $500 to waive all future claims against the company. Had he held that 10% stake, it would have eventually been worth hundreds of billions of dollars. Secret 28. The haunting of a past failure. Wayne's decision was not a foolish whim. It was a decision born of deep-seated, rational fear. 14. He was haunted by a previous engineering firm he had started, named Cyan, which had failed in 1971. 14. Secret 29. The weight of personal responsibility. The failure of Cyan had left Wayne personally responsible for repaying his investors, a trauma that shaped his future tendency to avoid risk. 14. Secret 30. The difficult genius. Wayne, an avid collector of stamps and coins, 14, was a risk-averse man who already found the passionate, difficult to work with Steve Jobs to be a terrifying business partner. 14. He looked at the fledgling Apple and saw a gamble he could not afford to take. 14. He was the first casualty of the company's world-changing, high-stakes ambition. Secret 31. The $20 microprocessor. A core part of the Apple I's show-off design was its affordability, which stemmed from Wozniak's choice of a microprocessor. He chose the 6502 chip for one reason only. It was the first one to sell over the counter for $20. 12. In contrast, the competing Intel 8080 processor cost $370 and was difficult for hobbyists to acquire. 12. Secret 32. The half the chips goal. The Apple I was a success at the homebrew club, but Wozniak's engineering mind was already focused on its successor. The entire concept for the Apple II evolved from a simple hobbyist goal: to show off by finding a way to rebuild the Apple I with half as many chips. A technical challenge that resulted in a much better product. Secret 33. The forgotten founder's other job. While Wayne is famous for his logo and his 10% stake, his most practical contribution to the Apple I was writing its operations manual. He drafted the technical documentation that helped the company's first customers actually use the machine. Part 3. The pivot that created an industry. 1976. The Apple I was a hobbyist kit. The Apple II was the world's first true personal computer. The massive pivot from one to the other did not come from Jobs or Wozniak, but was forced upon them by their very first customer in a single, high-stakes confrontation. Secret 34. Paul Terrell. Paul Terrell was an entrepreneur who, in 1975, founded the Byte Shop, one of the world's first ever personal computer retail stores. For his pivotal role in Apple's history, Steve Wozniak later referred to him as the fourth Apple founder. Secret 35. The arrogant pitch. A 21-year-old Steve Jobs and 26-year-old Steve Wozniak, two young and hungry entrepreneurs, approached Terrell to sell their product. Terrell knew Jobs from the Homebrew Computer Club, and in a later interview, recalled that Jobs, even then, was arrogant, intense, and had a pretty good-sized ego. Secret 36. The rejection of the kit. Jobs' pitch was to sell the Apple I as a kit, a bare circuit board for $35 that customers would, have to assemble themselves. 23. Terrell, who understood the emerging market, immediately rejected the idea. 23. Secret 37. The demand that changed the world. Terrell told Jobs that the market was shifting beyond hobbyists. Bite shop customers, he insisted, desired fully assembled machines. 23. Secret 38. The 50 computer order. Terrell then made a make-or-break offer. He would buy 50 Apple I computers, but only if they came fully assembled. 23. Secret 39. The $500 per unit deal. The deal was for $500 per machine, for a total of $25,000. Critically for Terrell, the payment terms were cash on delivery, COD. For Jobs and Wozniak, who were broke, this was a monumental order. 24. Secret 40. The creative funding model. The duo did not have the money to buy the parts to build 50 computers. So Jobs took the signed purchase order from the bite shop to a local creditor. Secret 41. The net 30 gamble. As recounted in Wozniak's autobiography, Jobs made a brilliant pitch to the creditor. I have this purchase order from the bite shop, and the payment terms are COD. If you give me the parts on a net 30-day terms, I can build and deliver the computers in that time frame, collect my money from Terrell, and pay you. 24. The creditor agreed. Jobs had funded his startup's first major order without giving up a single point of equity. Secret 42. The $666.66 joke price. Jobs and Wozniak delivered the computers, got paid, and paid their creditor. Paul Terrell then put the Apple I on his shelves, marking it up from his $500 cost to a retail price of $666.66. This price, which seems ominous, was actually a joke that appealed to Wozniak's love of repeating digits. A $500 cost and a 33.3% markup. More accurately, the machine was first released on April 11, 1976, and as a joke, the Steves set the price at $666.66. Secret 43. The assembled lie. The secret, however, was that the fully assembled computer Apple delivered was assembled in little more than name. It was just the motherboard. To get a working system, a user still had to buy and add their own power supply, keyboard, and display. Secret 44. The pivot to the Apple II, but the pivot had been forced. The Apple I was still a hobby computer. 24. But Paul Terrell's words stuck in Jobs' head. What I needed was an assembled and tested unit that could sell to people that really just wanted to use them. 24. That single realization, born from that single order, led Jobs and his team to create the Apple II, the world's first true all-in-one, out-of-the-box personal computer for general consumers, igniting the personal computer revolution. 23. Part 4. The Park Visit and the Pirate War, 1979-1983. Apple's most fertile creative period was not one of peace. It was defined by a legendary heist of technology and a subsequent, self-inflicted civil war between two rival computer teams, a war intentionally fostered by Steve Jobs himself. Secret 45. The rich neighbor myth. The legend is that Steve Jobs stole the graphical user interface, GUI, the mouse, and the desktop metaphor from Xerox's famous research lab, PARC. Secret 46. The Bill Gates Retort. The story is best summarized by a famous quote attributed to Bill Gates. Years later, when Jobs accused Gates of stealing Apple's GUI for Windows, Gates reportedly retorted, "Well, Steve, I think it's more like we both had this rich neighbor named Xerox, and I broke into his house to steal the TV set and found out that you had already stolen it." Secret 47. The kimono deal, not theft. But the secret is that it wasn't a theft. It was a strategic investment. 30. In 1979, Jobs proposed a deal. He would allow Xerox to buy 100,000 shares of Apple's highly anticipated pre-IPO stock for $1 million. 30. Secret 48. Opening the kimono. In exchange for this ludicrous deal, 30, Xerox's research lab, PARC, would have to open its kimono, 30, and give Jobs and his team a full tour of the technologies they were developing, but had failed to commercialize. Secret 49. The tour that changed the world. Jobs was given 2 tours. An engineer named Larry Tesler, whom Jobs would later hire, 33, showed him the Xerox Alto computer. Jobs saw, for the first time, a mouse moving a cursor, icons on a screen, overlapping windows, and an elegant word processing program. Secret 50. The influential failure called Lisa. Jobs, his mind blown by the potential of the GUI, returned to Apple and immediately redirected the company's next-generation computer project, the Lisa, to incorporate these ideas. The 9995 disaster. The Apple Lisa, released in 1983, was a commercial disaster. At a cost of $9,995, it was prohibitively expensive. It was also sluggish, as its sophisticated multitasking operating system was too much for its processor. Secret 52. The Twiggy floppy drive. The Lisa also shipped with an in-house designed floppy drive called Twiggy, which proved to be notoriously unreliable, adding to its commercial failure. Secret 53. The Pirate Schism. Jobs' abrasive and authoritarian management style on the Lisa project led to infighting, and in 1981, he was unceremoniously removed from the team, the very project he had championed. Secret 54. The Macintosh Revenge Project. Furious, Jobs pivoted. He hijacked a quirky research effort within Apple known as the Macintosh, which was originally conceived by Jeff Raskin as a simple, text-based appliance. Jobs decided to reshape the Macintosh into a cheaper, faster, better version of the Lisa, a GUI-driven alternative, without the hefty price tag. 35. Poaching Lisa technology. Secret 55. This set up an intense, bitter rivalry between the corporate Lisa team and Jobs' new rebellious Mac team. 36. Jobs actively poached key talent and technologies from the Lisa project, including Bill Atkinson's brilliant QuickDraw graphics library. Secret 56. It's better to be a pirate. Jobs needed to motivate his new rogue Macintosh team. At an off-site retreat in Carmel in January 1983, he began the meeting with 3 sayings from Chairman Jobs. 3P Secret 57. Then join the Navy. The most famous of these sayings was, "It's better to be a pirate than join the Navy." This was a direct and public shot at the corporate Lisa team, whom Jobs had now designated as the Navy. Secret 58. The hoisting of the Jolly Roger. The Mac team embraced their new identity. Inspired by the slogan, programmer Steve Capps suggested that if they were pirates, their building, Bandly 3, should fly a pirate flag. Secret 59. The rainbow eye patch. Capps bought and sewed a black flag. He asked the Mac team's brilliant graphic designer, Susan Kerr, to paint a large white skull and crossbones at the center. As the finishing touch, they stuck a rainbow-colored Apple logo decal on the skull, serving as the requisite eye patch. Secret 60. The Sunday night installation. On a Sunday night in August 1983, Capps climbed onto the roof of Bandly 3 and hoisted the flag, securing it with rusty nails and a metal pole. When the entire company arrived on Monday morning, the Mac team had, quite literally, declared internal war. Secret 61. The Lisa team heist. Jobs and the Mac team loved the flag, which flew for about 2 months. Then, one morning, it was gone. Secret 62. The ransom note. The rival Lisa team had stolen it. They sent a ransom note, or a similar message, claiming responsibility. Secret 63. The storming of the Lisa building. Brer and a furious contingent from the Mac team stormed the Lisa building to retrieve their flag. Steve Capps himself found it and had to wrestle the flag from a secretary who was hiding it in her desk. 3. This rivalry, which Jobs had intentionally manufactured, was the furnace that forged the Macintosh. Secret 64. The soul of the Mac, Susan Kerr. The Mac's soul wasn't just its pirate spirit. It was its friendly and whimsical interface, all designed by Susan Kerr. Secret 65. Overcoming FUD. Kerr's job was to humanize the machine and help new users overcome what was called the FUD principle, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt that non-technical people had about computers. Secret 66. The Happy Mac and the Bomb. Her friendly designs, like the Happy Mac icon that greeted users at startup, or the still-dreaded ticking bomb that represented a system error, gave the machine a visual lexicon that was universally inviting and intuitive. Secret 67. The secret of the command key. Many of Kerr's icons had secret origins. To create the command key icon, she was poring through an old book of symbology. Secret 68. The Swedish campground symbol. Kerr found the St. Hannes cross, an ancient symbol also used in 1960s Scandinavia, to mark locations of cultural interest, like a campground or a tourist site. That obscure Swedish point of interest symbol is now on billions of Mac keyboards worldwide. Secret 69. The third-party repellent. A critical and secret reason for the Lisa's commercial failure was its software strategy. The Lisa was shipped with a suite of applications, that were bundled with the system. 33. This decision discouraged third-party developers from creating their own software for the Lisa, killing the ecosystem before it could begin. Secret 70. The Lisa 2 correction. Apple knew the Lisa 1 was a failure, particularly its unreliable Twiggy floppy drives. When the Macintosh was announced, Apple also announced the Lisa 2 The new model's biggest change was a secret admission of failure. It replaced the twin Twiggy drives with a single 3.5-inch Sony floppy drive. Exact same drive used in the new Macintosh. Secret 71. The other two sayings from Chairman Jobs. The pirate quote was the most famous, but it was one of three sayings from Chairman Jobs announced at that 1983 retreat. The other two became legendary mantras for the Mac team. Real artists ship, a jab at the endlessly delayed Lisa project, and Mac in a book by 1986. Secret 72. The jagged font solution. Susan Kare didn't just design the icons. She also designed the original Macintosh fonts. 44. She had to solve the problem of making text readable and attractive on a low-resolution screen, which often looked jagged. 87. Her solution was to design the fonts within a tiny 9x7 pixel constraint, using only horizontal, vertical, or 45-degree lines to create a clean, modern look. 87. P. Part 5. The 1984 ad, The Ousting, and the Wilderness, 1984 to 1996. P. Break P. The launch of the Macintosh was prefaced by the most famous commercial in history. But its success was short-lived, and the pirate philosophy that Steve Jobs had championed would soon be turned against him, leading to one of the most tragic and famous exiles in corporate history. Secret 73, the masterpiece ad. The 1984 Super Bowl ad, directed by Ridley Scott, fresh off Blade Runner, is considered a watershed event and a masterpiece in advertising. It cast IBM's Big Blue as a big brother figure, with the Mac as the revolutionary heroine, saving humanity from conformity. Secret 74, the ad that almost didn't air. But the ad was a subject of contention within Apple. The company's board of directors hated it, and after seeing the final cut, ordered the ad agency, Chiat/Day, to pull it from the Super Bowl and sell off the airtime. Secret 75, the Idaho secret. The agency, Chiat/Day, believed in the ad. They also wanted it to qualify for the 1984 Clio Advertising Awards, which required it to air at least once in 1983. Secret 76, the 1 a.m. airing. So the agency secretly ran the $900,000 ad 47 once at 1 a.m. on a small, local television station in Twin Falls, Idaho on December 15th, 1983, just to make the awards deadline. Secret 77, the fascist extras. Ridley Scott needed a striking, dystopian crowd of bald, drone-like men to watch Big Brother. To achieve this look, he employed a cost-saving measure. Secret 78, the National Front connection. Instead of paying extras and barbers to shave hundreds of heads, Scott hired 200 real skinheads. The secret is who these skinheads were: members of the National Front, a far-right fascist political party in the UK. This choice, made for economy, inadvertently added a complex, controversial layer to an ad supposedly about liberation. 49. Secret 79, the sugar water pitch. To help manage Apple's explosive growth, Steve Jobs himself recruited a new CEO in 1983, PepsiCo's John Scully, 34. Secret 80, change the world. Secret 80. Jobs famously lured Scully with one of the most powerful lines in business history. Do you want to spend the rest of your life selling sugared water? Or do you want a chance to change the world? 50. Secret 81. The toy computer. The Mac launched to great fanfare in 1984. But after a strong start, sales were disappointing. 50. The 1985 Macintosh Office launch was panned by critics, who called the computer a toy for its low computing power. 51. Jobs, according to Scully, went into a deep depression. 51. Secret 82. The Pirate versus Navy Showdown. Period. Jobs and Scully began to clash violently over strategy. Jobs wanted to slash the price of the Macintosh and shift a large portion of the company's advertising budget away from the profitable Apple II to prop up his struggling Mac. Secret 83. The suicidal move. Scully saw this as a suicidal move. He told Jobs, "The reason the Mac is not selling has nothing to do with the price or with the advertising. We risk throwing the company into a loss." This was the Pirate King, Jobs, trying to sink the Navy's flagship, Apple II, to save his own pirate ship, Mac. Secret 84. The China Plot Coup. In May 1985, Jobs, furious at being sidelined, staged a boardroom coup. His plan was to get the board to oust Scully. He decided to make his move while Scully was scheduled to be away on a business trip in China. Secret 85. The critical mistake. Jobs' mutiny failed because of a critical mistake. He tried to recruit Apple executive Jean-Louis Gasset to his pirate side. Secret 86. The betrayal. Gasset, horrified by the plot, refused. He immediately went to Scully and informed him of the entire plan. Secret 87. The boardroom showdown. Scully, now aware of the coup, immediately canceled his trip to China. He called an emergency board meeting on May 24th. At the meeting, Jobs made his case, reportedly telling Scully to his face, "You really should leave this company." Continuing to give 6. You don't know how to operate. 52. Secret 88. The pirate ousted. The board, forced to choose between the admiral, Scully, and the pirate, Jobs, sided with Scully. 34. Jobs was stripped of all operational command and demoted to a symbolic role. 50. Jobs, the 30-year-old co-founder, was effectively out of the company he had created. Secret 89. The wilderness and reverse takeover. Jobs, in his wilderness years, founded Next, a high-end computer company. 34. By 1996, Apple, under a string of failed CEOs after Scully, was steadily losing money. 54. And was weeks from bankruptcy. Secret 90. The $429 million return. In a stunning reverse takeover, Apple announced it was buying Jobs' company, Next, for $429 million. 34. The deal was a Trojan horse. Apple wasn't just buying Next's Next Step operating system, which would become the foundation for all future macOS and iOS software. It was buying Steve Jobs. He was back. Secret 91. The 1984 ad's ironic coda. Years later, director Ridley Scott reflected on the ad's legacy. In an ironic twist, he pointed to the iPhone as the modern realization of the dystopian technology he had warned about, calling the smartphone a fucking disaster. That is the new 1984. Secret 92. The best thing that ever happened. While the ousting was a devastating betrayal, Jobs later reflected on it with surprising clarity. He famously said that getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could have ever happened to me. 50. The wilderness years allowed him to mature as an executive at Next and Pixar, transforming him into the seasoned leader who could eventually return and save the company. Part 6. The Return and the Think Different Revival, 1997 to 2000. When Steve Jobs returned to Apple in 1997, he returned to a company that had lost its soul. It was producing beige box devices that looked like every other PC on the market. 54. His first act was not to launch a product, but to launch a cultural reboot. Secret 93. The Think Different message. The Think Different campaign was Jobs' reboot of Apple's soul. It was a message directed as much internally to his own employees as it was externally to customers. He was reminding the beige company of its pirate heritage. Secret 94. The ad Jobs hated. The campaign, with its "Here's to the crazy ones, the misfits, the rebels" copy, is now legendary. But when the ad agency, TBWA Shit Day, first pitched the concept, Jobs' reaction was classic Steve. He hated it, and according to copywriter Rob Siltonen, told the agency it was shit. Days later, he came around and embraced it as the perfect summation of his vision. Secret 95. The arrogant Steve Jobs narration. Two versions of the Crazy Ones television ad were recorded. The famous version that aired was narrated by actor Richard Dreyfuss. Secret 96. The lost narration. The other version was narrated by Steve Jobs himself. He recorded it, but ultimately didn't allow it to air for fear that people would consider it arrogant. 56. This lost narration is now a treasured artifact for Apple fans. Secret 97. The beige box opportunity. With the culture reset, Jobs turned to the products. He saw the beige boxes, 54, that Apple and its competitors were selling as the new Big Brother conformity. The first product of this new vision was the iMac G3, 57. Secret 98. The I in iMac. The iMac was built to be the simplest way for a consumer to get online, which Jobs saw as the next significant innovation. The I in its name, coined by adman Ken Siegel, 56, initially stood for Internet, 54. Secret 99. The three-step Internet. The iMac's ad campaign, featuring Jeff Goldblum, touted its simplicity. It was designed to get a user on the internet in just a few simple steps, a stark contrast to the complex beige PCs of the day. Secret 100. Killing the floppy disk. The iMac, in its Bondi blue translucent, teardrop-shaped case, was a radical departure, designed by a young Johnny Ive. It was hated by journalists at first because it eschewed legacy technologies. Secret 101. The courage to remove ports. In a move that would become an Apple hallmark, Jobs courageously removed beloved ports. The iMac had no floppy disk drive and no serial ports. Instead, it forced users to adopt the then new CD-ROM and USB standards. Secret 102. The Snow White language. Johnny Ive's new translucent, candy-like, and bulging design was a direct rebellion against Apple's own design history. Secret 103. Apple's beige past. From 1984 to 1990, Apple's official design language, developed by Hartmut Esslinger's Frog Design, was called Snow White 59. This language was defined by its light gray platinum or off-white fog colors 61, minimal surface texturing, and shallow horizontal and vertical lines 61. The colorful iMac was the physical death of Apple's beige past. The iMac was an immediate commercial success and is credited with saving Apple from financial ruin. 57. Secret 104. For Secret, the Dead Poets Society pitch, Jobs had a different idea for the ad's audio. He originally wanted to use an inspirational speech given by Robin Williams from the film Dead Poets Society. 56. That idea was shelved, but Apple eventually used a Williams audio sample for an iPad ad in 2014. 56. Secret 105. The Grammatical Rebellion. The Think Different slogan was a subject of internal debate. The grammatically correct phrase would have been think differently. 89. However, the ad agency and Jobs insisted on think different, framing it as a noun. To think different was to think about and be the different things, the crazy ones. Secret 106. The handle. A key feature of Johnny Ive's iMac G3 design, which signaled its departure from beige box computing, was the prominent handle built into the top of the case. This encouraged the user to see the computer not as a static piece of office equipment, but as a personal, friendly object that could be moved. Part 7. The Pocket Revolutions. iPod and iPhone, 2001 to 2007. With Apple saved from bankruptcy, Jobs turned his attention to new markets. The next decade was defined by two top-secret, high-stakes projects that would shrink the company's pirate soul and place it directly into the user's pocket. Secret 107. The father of the iPod. The iPod 2001 was not a Steve Jobs idea. The concept came from Tony Fadell, a former Philips engineer, who envisioned a device that held thousands of songs and fit in a pocket. Secret 108. The idea Jobs initially rejected. Fadell pitched his idea to Jobs, who initially rejected it. Only later did Jobs warm to the idea and hire Fadell to lead the secret project. Secret 109. The Dulcimer Project. Fadell's project was given the codename Dulcimer. The development was a battleground. Secret 110. The 10 GB versus 5 GB battle. John Rubinstein led the development team and wanted a 10 GB model. Jobs, the perfectionist, insisted on a smaller 5 GB model to maintain a sleek design. Secret 111. The buttons versus click wheel battle. Rubinstein also wanted the device to have buttons. Jobs advocated for the simple click wheel. In both battles, Jobs' vision of simplicity and design won, resulting in the iconic white marvel that held 1,000 songs. Secret 112. The other secret iPod. In 2005, Apple was secretly contacted by the US Department of Energy to build a special iPod. Secret 113, the four-man secret. This project was so secret that according to engineer David Shire, only 4 people at Apple knew about it. Shire, the director of iPod software, the VP of the iPod division, and the SVP of hardware. There was no paper trail. All communication was in person. 64. Secret 114. The Geiger counter iPod. The DOE tasked Apple with modifying an iPod to record data from a custom hardware component. The Apple engineers were not allowed to see this component. Based on the project's needs, they believed they were designing something like a hidden Geiger counter, a device that would allow federal agents to search for dirty atomic bombs or stolen uranium in cities without attracting the attention of residents. Secret 115. The Project Purple secrecy. The secrecy for the Geiger counter iPod was extreme, but it was nothing compared to the development of the iPhone 2005 to 2007, which was codenamed Project Purple. 65. The mystery recruitment. Engineers were recruited by their own bosses in secret meetings. The pitch was, "I have an exciting opportunity for you. This project is going to demand all of your time. And I cannot tell you what it is, and you have to tell me whether or not you're on board today." 66. The NDA for the NDA. The secrecy was layered. One engineer described the process. When you finally got read in, you signed an NDA that let you see the NDA that had the code name on it. You couldn't see the code name until you agreed not to discuss the code name. 67. Secret 118. The Big Mac prototype. The first iPhone prototypes were not the sleek devices we know. Tony Fadell recalled that the first demo unit was huge. It was like a Big Mac. 68. Secret 119. Hardware and software teams were kept separate to prevent leaks. While the hardware team worked on the Big Mac, the software engineers were handed clumsy wooden boxes that ran their programs. 65. Secret 120. The iPhone's defensive origin. The iPhone is seen as a brilliant offensive move, but its origins were defensive. In 2005, Apple's entire business rested on the iPod. The biggest threat was not other MP3 players. It was cell phones that could also play music, like the Motorola Roker E169. Jobs knew he had to cannibalize his own most successful product before a competitor did. Secret 121. The internal bake-off. To create the iPhone's operating system, Steve Jobs did what he did best. He manufactured an internal competition. He pitted 2 of his top executives against each other in a head-to-head bake-off. 70. Secret 122. Team 1. The iPod phone, Acorn OS. This team was led by iPod father Tony Fadell. 70. Their idea was to evolve the iPod, enlarge the iPod's OS. Secret 123. The virtual click wheel. Their prototype, codenamed P1, ran an operating system called Acorn OS. 70. Its interface featured a virtual on-screen click wheel on the bottom half of the screen, which was used to navigate an iPod-like menu on the top half. 70. Secret 124. Team 2, the Mac phone. This team was led by Mac software executive Scott Forstall. 70. Their idea was a revolution, a compact version of the Mac's OS, built around a new, experimental technology called multi-touch. Secret 125. The losing sides work. Scott Forstall's Mini Mac team won the competition. 70. Fidel's Acorn OS and the virtual click wheel were shelved, becoming a bygone leftover of the losing side's work. 70. Secret 126. The ping pong table prototype. Brett's multi-touch technology that Forstall's team used was, at first, not small. 73. The input engineering team had built a giant experimental system to test multi-touch. It was a big capacitive display about the size of a ping pong table. 73. The iPhone's revolutionary swipe to unlock and pinch to zoom gestures were born on this giant table. Secret 127. The music label war. The iPod and iPhone would have been useless without music. The 2003 launch of the iTunes Music Store was a prerequisite, but getting the 5 major labels on board was a war. Secret 128. The conflicting demands. The labels, terrified of digital piracy, like Napster, 62, all had conflicting demands. Warner Music wanted variable pricing for hits. Sony BMG wanted an agency model to maintain price control. Universal wanted watermarking. On individual tracks, 74. Jobs' ultimate victory was forcing them all to accept his simple, flat, 99-cent per song model, which revolutionized the music industry. Secret 129. The double-blind codenames. The Project Purple secrecy went even deeper. Apple would sometimes assign different code names to groups working on the same project. For example, the hardware project might have one name, while the user's software project had another. This ensured that 2 engineers could be working on the iPhone and not even realize they were on the same team. Secret 130. The keyboard all-stop. One of the most difficult parts of the iPhone's development was the on-screen keyboard. Scott Forstall, head of the P2 multi-touch project, became so focused on it that he paused all other interface development until his team could perfect the predictive typing system that ultimately shipped with the phone. Secret 131. The music label bargaining chip. When the iTunes Music Store launched in 2003, it was the first digital store to feature backing from all 5 major labels. To lure the reluctant labels who were terrified of piracy, Apple offered a powerful bargaining chip that competing services could not. Advertising. 75. Part 8. The Empire, the New Guard, and the Next Frontier. 2011 to present. The Jobs era was a revolution, defined by high-risk, bet-the-company moves. The Tim Cook era is the imperial phase, a period of stabilization, operational mastery, and the monetization of the billion-plus citizens the revolution had conquered. Period. Secret 132. Tim Cook was named CEO on August 24, with Steve Jobs remaining an active chairman. Secret 133. The 6-week shock. Just 6 weeks later, on October 5th, 2011, Steve Jobs passed away. 77. Cook, who had expected to have his mentor, an animating force, 77, at his side for years, was now alone. His leadership began not as a transition, but as a baptism by fire. 77. Secret 134. Animating force versus supply chain maestro. Secret seemed impossible, replacing Jobs, the visionary 50, and creative genius 76, with Cook, a man known as an operations 78, and supply chain 79 expert. The high-risk 77, abrasive 34 culture was being replaced by Cook's collaborative and conciliatory style. 0.79. Secret 135. But Cook's genius was the secret, unsung hero of the iPhone's success all along. He was officially named COO in 2005, but at the time, Jobs announced, "Tim has been doing this job for over 2 years now." 78. Secret 136. The supply chain beast. It was Cook who streamlined ops, boosted margins, and built the supply chain beast that later fueled the iPhone boom. 78. Jobs was the visionary, but Cook was the maestro, who could actually manufacture and deliver 100 million of those visions on time. Secret 137. The 1800% growth. While the Jobs era created the product, the Cook era created the empire. Under Tim Cook's operational leadership, Apple's stock has increased by around 1,800%. 80. Table 1. The two eras of Apple, a philosophical and product comparison. This table summarizes the fundamental shift in Apple's corporate identity, from a revolutionary state to an imperial one. The Jobs era was defined by high-risk 77 creation, while the Cook era is defined by supply chain 79 mastery and operational scale. Secret 138. The backwards watch. The Apple Watch 2015 was the first major new product of the Cook era. Its development, led by Johnny Ive, was famously backwards. Secret 139. A watch first, a reason later. According to a Wired magazine expose, Apple decided to make a watch and only then set out to discover what it might be good for, besides, displaying the time. Secret 140. The watch's raison d'etre. Eureka moment for the watch team was a shocking realization. The problem the watch needed to solve was the iPhone. Secret 141. Your phone is ruining your life. As the Wired article put it, along the way, the Apple team landed upon the watch's raison d'etre. It came down to this: your phone is ruining your life. The Apple Watch was designed as the solution to the phone addiction that Apple itself had helped create. 33. Further, the Apple Watch was designed to be used in short bursts of no more than 10 seconds each to free users from being glued to a cell phone screen. Further, the Apple Watch and the Velcro iPhone. The first working prototypes for the Apple Watch were comically crude. The very first prototype was an iPhone attached to a Velcro strap, which ran a simulator of the early Watch OS. Secret 143. The services pivot. As the global smartphone market stabilized, i.e. stopped growing exponentially, Apple's core strategy shifted under Cook. This new strategy is known as the services pivot. Secret 144. Taxing the billion user base. The goal of this pivot is to leverage the active base of more than 1 billion devices and sell subscriptions, App Store, Apple Music, Apple Pay, Apple TV+, iCloud, to that captured audience. Secret 145, the 80 billion plus engine. This pivot has been astoundingly successful. It is now Apple's main growth engine. 85 for the fiscal year 2023. Apple's services revenue alone exceeded $80 billion, making Apple's services division, if it were its own company, larger than most Fortune 500 corporations. Secret 146. The Holy Grail of Health. Apple's next frontier is health. A top-secret skunkworks project within the company has been working for years on the Holy Grail of non-invasive sensors. Secret 147. The non-invasive diabetes sensor. Apple has a proof-of-concept prototype that uses a silicon chip to shine light from a laser to determine the density of blood sugar for a user without a pinprick. Secret 148. The game changer. This technology would be a game changer for the 10.5% of people in the US alone who have diabetes. The Holy Grail is to condense it to make it fit into its Apple Watch, transforming the device from a wellness product into a life-saving medical one. Secret 149. The watch's 2002 Nike origin. While the watch's backwards development began in earnest after Jobs' passing, its true foundation stretches back to 2002. Years before the iPhone, Apple's design team, led by Jony Ive, requested several high-end sports watches from Nike for study, planting the seed for a wearable device. 90p CP. Conclusions. The enduring duality. The history of Apple is not a straight line, but a circle. It is a story that begins and ends with the two Steves dynamic. The company's founding was a battle between Wozniak's open-source hobbyist ideal, 13, and Jobs' closed-system product vision. The pirate mentality that Jobs fostered to create the Mac was the same toxic force that led to his ousting by the Navy CEO he himself had hired. The Think Different campaign was a return to that rebel soul, 55, and the iPhone was the ultimate expression of the bet the company, 77 risk that defined the Jobs era. Today, the Jobs era, the revolution, is complete. The Cook era, the empire, is in full effect. The company has become the Navy that Jobs once railed against. A stable, efficient, supply chain beast 78 that generates $80 billion a year in services from its billion-plus locked-in users. The pirate has become the Navy. The rebel has become the big brother it once warned against in 1984. And yet, that original DNA endures. Deep inside the empire, a secret team works on a holy grail sensor that could change medicine forever. A pirate project, a rebellious idea, still voyaging through strange seas of thought, waiting to be born.